Namaste. We see all around hundreds of citizens in society ruining their health and wealth due to addiction of various types. Even when they wish to come out of it,
Here are some
they find
results.
it hard to do despite such huge price that they pay. A large percentage of those who seek professional help in the mental health suffer from substance related and addictive disorders. The addiction ranges from a cup of coffee to strong drugs. We shall discuss today substance related and addictive disorders with psychoanalysis consultant and expert Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Mr. Vaidya, can we start with what is addiction? We hear it so often. Is addiction only for substances?
Addiction is unnatural dependence on something. This dependence is of the nature of a craving. This craving, if not satisfied, leads to and the person often indulges in search of that thing which can satisfy the craving at great personal cost to himself in personal life, occupational life, interpersonal life, or to society. And because this distress and impairment is involved in that craving, that uncontrollable craving, we call it addiction. Addiction can be of substances or other elements also, which can include addiction to activities like gambling, going to a cinema, seeing the same movie 25 times, going to the same place at the same time every evening or every morning. It can include computer gaming. It can include going to certain parties or workshops. So there is a wide range of things to which people can get addicted to. Addiction can therefore be of substances or other entities also.
Mhm. So, when we talk about DSM 5, what is this chapter substance related and addictive disorder all about listed there?
DSM-5 talks about two kinds of addictions, substance related and activity related. In substance related addiction, they make a mention of a list of almost 8 to 10 different substances like alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, stimulants, sedatives, different hallucinogens, hypnotic drugs, different kinds of chemicals and substances to which people get addicted to. So one part of this DSM chapter deals with substance addiction. This chapter also includes one non-substance addiction, which is gambling. Now, if we look at addiction into two parts, substance addiction and non-substance addiction, which can include, as I said before, activities, events, places, experiences, then DSM-5 as yet is very conservative because researches are not complete where it can be established beyond reasonable doubt that impairment and distress is happening in other forms of cravings also. I am referring to repeated cravings and repeated satisfaction. And therefore, I think as researches go on, in DSM-6 or DSM-7, we should see addition of many non-substance related addictions, which include activities like computer gaming, going to a movie, experiences, places, and so on. So I think the scope is going to widen, but for the present, we have only two broad categories of addictions, substance and activity, and within activity, only one activity, gambling, is as yet covered in the chapter.
Well, the way you have explained, we can see so many different types of addictions prevailing in the society with different age groups. So I
Yes,
somewhere
very
we
true.
feel that there are a lot many disorders covered under the chapter substance related and addictive disorders. So like what are the disorders actually covered under this chapter?
Uh, the disorders covered are divided into three components, every disorder by and large. So broadly they cover substance addiction and gambling. This is what they cover. Within substance addiction, they cover 10 to 12 different substances to which people can get addicted, like alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, hallucinogenic drugs, hypnotic drugs, sedatives, stimulants, cannabis, and so on. Now, what they do is, this chapter, it covers the addiction in three parts. Use addiction, so problems related to the use of a substance, which includes two parts. First, the craving and the distress during craving. So craving and use is one component of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the desire to have a substance, the craving, the distress, the unbearability of distress, the desperation to have it, and having it. Just after having it, what do you feel? So the problems of not having it and craving for it, and the problems just after having it, that is one part called use part of the addiction. Second is when the substance in adequate amount goes inside and it starts creating what is called intoxication. That is the second component of the problem, intoxication related problems. And third is when you start withdrawing from that thing. You want to give it up, you want to withdraw, or it is not available or not affordable. And somehow the regular frequency, the regular cycle is disrupted. And then you have the withdrawal problems. So this chapter talks about the use problems, the intoxication problems, and the withdrawal problems. And all the substances that they talk about,
Mm-hmm.
which I mentioned before, whether it is alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, cannabis, hallucinogens, in all these categories they talk about the three. So if they are talking about uh, caffeine, they will say caffeine use, caffeine intoxication, and caffeine withdrawal.
Right.
Alcohol use, alcohol intoxication, alcohol withdrawal. So
Mm-hmm.
all substances they deal with the problem. All substances they deal with in these three categories. The problems related to use, which
Mm-hmm.
is craving and use just after use, and then heavy use or intoxication,
Mm-hmm.
and third is withdrawal. So this is the way they describe all the problems of addiction, especially substance addiction, in this chapter.
That's quite a systematic way of explaining this. Reason being, like, I think the craving part, as you mentioned here, Mr. Vedya, that is something so very important because when a person must be trying to get into a therapy or heal himself and get free from the addiction, the relapses are very much possible if the craving part is not very well understood. And that brings another question here, like,
Very,
yeah, and somewhere,
yeah, very true. I mean,
yes, please.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you were saying that relapse is a very pervasive and a central part of difficulties of this chapter.
Right.
And I think the relapse uh, is one of the strongest manifestations of relapse is in this chapter.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying something. I came in between.
Yeah, that's actually very important what you mentioned right now. Uh, when we talk about the entire process, like the use and the intoxication, and then the withdrawal, and now we just discussed the relapse as well. Is substance addiction purely biological, or there is a psychoanalytic aspect to it as well?
Any addiction has three components:
Mm-hmm.
the psychological component, the pleasure component, and the biochemical component. You don't start an addiction with intoxication. You start it because of some psychological factors. But very soon, the intoxication and the biochemical component starts. So initially, there is a psychological motivation, then there is a pleasure motivation, and then there is a biochemical motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So the psychological component, the pleasure component, and the biochemical component, all the three components are there in most of the addictions. Now, if we look at substance addiction and non-substance addictions, in substance addiction, the biochemical component is much stronger. Once the addiction has taken root, whereas in non-substance addictions like gambling or watching cinema or sex or computer gaming or going to place particular place at a particular time, those kind of addictions, uh, they have very less of the biochemical component because nothing is going inside. We are not talking of a substance that is going inside the body. And in those kind of addictions of non-substance type, we will look at the psychological and the pleasure component
Mm-hmm.
as being the stronger elements of that particular addiction. If again we look at DSM's model, and if we look at the three components of the addictive cycle,
Mm-hmm.
the use, the intoxication, and the withdrawal, then in use component, there is a very strong psychological and pleasure component.
Mm-hmm.
In the intoxication and withdrawal, there is a very strong biochemical component. Intoxication is largely biochemical,
Mm-hmm.
and withdrawal is like 75-25. 75% is biochemical and 25% is also psychological. Now, the point is, when it comes to the biochemical component, we are looking at psychiatric treatment, drugs, rehabilitation, admission in hospital, and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the psychological component and the pleasure component, this is where psychotherapy and psychoanalysis can come in and make a difference. So this is an area that we can come in. If we look at the same model of use, intoxication and withdrawal,
Mm-hmm.
and we try to apply it to non-substance addictions, obviously we will not find the intoxication component as we find in substance addiction,
Right.
because the intoxication there will be of a very different nature.
Mm-hmm.
It will be there in an essential metaphorical sense, it will be there,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the biochemical sense that we find in the substance addiction. And here, all the three, use, intoxication, and withdrawal, in all the three elements, if we want to apply that model, will have very, very heavy psychological component, and therefore psychotherapy, psychoanalysis can play a very large role in all the three components if we look at the non-substance addiction.
Yes, as we explore addiction today from psychological point of view, yes, of course, physiological part is also involved. Now, since we have an expert with us, how does psychoanalysis relate to these three categories of use, intoxication, and withdrawal, Mr. Vidya?
Uh, Psychoanalysis, uh, if let us start first with the substance addiction. So in substance addiction, psychoanalysis can play a strong role in the use part of it, very weak or negligible role in the intoxication part of it, and a moderate role in the withdrawal part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we look at the use, and we will go into details of it as to why people go for addictions, what is the psychoanalytic explanation of why people go for addictions? So that we will take up slightly later. But just to make a note of it, there are very strong psychological motivations, unconscious in nature, to go for addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So psychoanalysis helps us explore and, if possible, overcome those motivations, and that is what it contributes to the use part. With relation to the intoxication part of substance addiction, there is little that we can do. It's largely biochemical.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do here is we can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
So when intoxication happens, something which was in the unconscious at a very repressed level, that suddenly flares up, exaggerates itself,
Mm-hmm.
and allows us to observe it very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So intoxication is a phase where instead of doing something, it is for us to learn out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because material will be coming out under intoxication, pleasant and unpleasant. So what are the repressed desires? What are the repressed fears? What are those pathological fantasies? All of that will come out under intoxication, not necessarily always, but in many cases it will. So the use part is where we can intervene and do something to a great extent. Intoxication is more for learning rather than doing something. And in withdrawal, it is both. If the withdrawal is very fast, there is little we can do except to learn from what the person is suffering from in withdrawal. Right? What was being satisfied by this addiction, which is no longer being satisfied. And those withdrawal symptoms will also give us a window into the unconscious. Apart from the biochemical aspect of it, that of course is there. So withdrawal can be both either only for learning, or if it is a very long tapered withdrawal, and if the person is in a rehabilitation situation, then of course, apart from the psychiatric care, we can also give psychoanalytic psychotherapy to accelerate that process. But if it's a quick one and not tapered and not within a uh, healing center situation, then all that we can do is we can learn from it what are the hidden elements, like the withdrawal itself will give us a window into the unconscious. So this is with regard to the substance addiction. With regard to non-substance addiction like gambling or going to a place or computer gaming, in all the three phases, psychoanalytic psychotherapy has a role to play in healing the person right across. So this is how psychoanalytic psychotherapy can play a role in uh, this area of addiction.
It's quite in depth. And how does psychoanalysis would explain the causation of substance addiction and activity addiction?
Uh, Psychoanalysis has many explanations why this happens, and there would be almost 10 to 15 explanations, which is very important to know. One, some can do it only for the pleasure of it. They just want more pleasure. Two, some would do it because they want to escape the negative emotions, negative feelings arising in them by default. Three, some would do it only for social acceptance, that they don't want to be left out of a group. So if everyone drinks, the person also drinks, and over a time he just realizes he's got addicted to it.
True.
Four, it may be because somebody wants to feel grown up, that if he does not do this, people will think he is a small, milky child. And he does not want to be that milky, chocolatey child. He wants to be that mature, tough, grown up. So some people, and this is very common in India, how people start taking chewing tobacco.
Right. I think it's
Because
more to do with
yeah,
peer pressure also, as what you're saying, the
yeah,
social
peer,
aspect.
yeah. So peer pressure and this need to develop and grow up. because inwardly one feels very inferior and weak as a child.
Right.
So one wants to be grown up.
Mhm.
Fifth, it can be a narcissistic pleasure of appearing heroic or macho.
Right.
So if the model or the hero is smoking a cigarette, I start smoking a cigarette. Then there are deeper explanations. So
Mhm.
these are like psychological explanations, psychoanalytic explanations, but still uh, more easy to absorb, more easy to understand, still on the surface. And then there are deeper explanations. For example,
Mhm.
the addiction may be a way to overcome the oral deficits. So the oral fixation is overcome by oral addictions.
Mhm.
Okay? So it may be alcohol, it may be tea, it may be coffee. So what the person did not get in his oral phase of life, he is getting it now. It may be that the substance of addiction becomes a good, reliable, stable object the person never had.
Mhm.
So it is a desperate attempt to have a good, reliable, stable object which will not go away, which will be available on demand.
Mhm.
It may also be that it is substitute for the mother's warm milk of the early childhood.
Mhm.
And without it, one feels abandoned because of early life experience of perceived abandonment when the person was being breastfed.
Mhm.
It may be the early life, even earlier life experience of abandonment, of having lost the good breast and the desperate attempt to regain the good breast. It can also be the fear of abandonment or disintegration anxiety as it rises. One feels fragmented. The sense of pleasure sort
Mhm.
of consolidates the person
Right.
because the nerves contract when you have pleasure, and it's a contraction pleasure.
Mhm.
So if pleasures can be divided into two, the contraction pleasure and the expansion pleasure. The sense pleasures are all contraction pleasures. The nerves contract. The entire apparatus contracts, the whole body contracts at
Mhm.
the nervous level or the muscular level.
Mhm.
So this contraction creates a consolidation and offers a defense against disintegration which is happening otherwise. So it is a defense against disintegration. It can also be, this addiction can also be a, a, a ego strength booster against performance anxiety.
Right.
That just before you have to perform, you take a cup of tea.
Right.
Right? This addiction can also be a stable, reliable companion across life
Mhm. Mhm.
because nobody reliable has been found otherwise. This can also be just a stress buster that because of unbalanced life, people are working too much and are stressed too much,
Mhm.
and they are not having adequate amount of rest or peace, so they don't experience bliss and reverie. This addiction can also be because of catastrophic thinking and the two poles of
Mhm.
torture and reverie. And real life looks like torture, and one needs 1 hour of reverie to refresh and rebalance oneself.
That's become an escape for them.
And it can, yes, and it's very necessary escape because either you overcome the catastrophic thinking,
Mhm.
okay, and or if you cannot, then it has to be balanced by this reverie.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have this reverie and you just be with the catastrophic thinking, very soon it will create serious problems.
Right.
And some people do it just for experiences because they are bored with ordinary experiences and they want mystical and spiritual experiences.
Mhm.
And some people do addiction because of aliveness and excitement, because that is an escape from the deadness within.
Right.
The deadness and the boredom within, from that they have to escape by with some excitement and be more alive. it can also be an escape from too much of sadness and hopelessness by being alive with that. So
So it becomes a
either you escape from
companion
something,
for depression in that case.
yes. So the stimulant the stimulant substance addiction is a response against depressive forces, whereas the sedative flavored addictions, they are a response against anxiety forces.
That's quite a
So that
wide.
will determine what sort of, yeah. So that will determine how you select the addiction substance.
Mr. Vedya, can it be like a
That one
person?
may try man, so one may try many substances and then settle upon a few which are responding to one's needs, whether the need is to respond more to depressive forces, anxiety forces, or disintegration forces.
Right. In fact, I'm reminded of, I'm sorry, I interrupted you in between. I was reminded of some kind of, people they are there who feel very weak when they are like, they're not sure about their self image, very less confident, and they doubt themselves. So when they get involved into substance abuse, after that they feel quite, there is a immediate magnified version which comes out and flares up. Sometimes I feel it is to do with the identity crisis also. That can also be one of the causation.
Yes, because, yeah. So the example that you gave is where one removes the inhibitions
Mm-hmm.
and allows the manic narcissistic personality from inside to come out.
Right.
And similarly, some people may even use it to forget too many worries that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is a kind of a release and respite from an unbearable reality.
So that's quite wide
It is
causation.
like applying the, yeah, yeah, it's very wide, yeah. It's like applying an ointment to heal the ache of life. So there's a very wide range of causation that psychoanalysis offers as an explanation to explain the process of addiction. And of course, there are nuances between substance addiction and non-substance addiction.
Mm-hmm.
The very element chosen for addiction also tells us in some way the story, what we call the story of the symptom.
Okay.
The story of the symptom tells us the story of the unconscious.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting and fascinating. Now when we talk about the healing approach, what is the healing approach in psychoanalysis for the substance related and addictive disorders? And is it always done one to
This
one?
is an area, uh, now, if we are looking at addiction, which is substance addiction,
Mm-hmm.
then because the strong biochemical component exists, usually it is done by a psychiatrist with support from psychoanalytic psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are looking at non-substance addictions, then we may be looking at support from psychiatry and psychoanalytic psychotherapy being the mainstream. Now, the way we would approach is the case history gives us the clue
Mm-hmm.
that what were the long-standing problems of the person, how did the addiction begin, and how has it developed. That provides us a window into the unconscious and tells us whether we should go for a Freudian therapy, a Kleinian flavored therapy, a Cohusian flavored therapy. But as a rule, if one is not sure, it is better to start with a Cohusian flavored therapy
Mm-hmm.
and then go into Freudian, Kleinian, or ISTDQ or any other form of therapy. Because uh, compassion, understanding, and empathy, these are something I think all anxiety patients And all addiction patients, they require it to a very intense degree.
Right.
So in terms of the flavor, I think the safest is start cohesion, then go Freudian, Kleinian, ISTDP way or Winnicottian way, whatever is the requirement of the person. So in terms of intensity, it requires lot of repeated meetings because long gaps between two sessions can undo the work of the session. This
Mm-hmm.
is one of those situations. So twice a week, 6 months in mild cases, to twice a week, 2 years in moderate to severe cases,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with psychiatric help where required. And of course, in most cases are substance cases, so it is required, and in fact, it's a center.
Mm-hmm.
Coupled with holistic healing, all of that is required for psychoanalytic psychotherapy for in this process. Coming to the second question, can it be done in the group or alone? Individual is always the best, but many people in developing countries like India cannot afford. So there is no scope, no, I will not say scope, but there is no way out but to go in for group therapy. Because if we want therapy to be available to most people, it can be done only in groups because they can't afford it otherwise. So group therapy works very well in addictions, unless you are talking about something very intimate like sexual addiction,
Mm-hmm.
where it may not be the right choice. But otherwise, addictions don't invade that inhibited taboo part as much. And therefore, group therapy works very well in this addiction area. Uh, Not only group therapy, but there are some support groups.
Mm.
So apart from therapy in groups, people can get associated in social support groups. You would have heard of Alcoholic Anonymous,
Yes.
which is a very famous support group. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, we can have a caffeine anonymous, we can have a cannabis anonymous, and so on. Right? We can have a gambling anonymous. So these support groups also are very important in complementing the psychoanalytic psychotherapy that we do.
So when we talk about the healing approaches, how can we miss on the holistic healing, Mr. Vedya? So holistic healing is something which we hear so often and it is so prevailing in current times. We talk about well-being, we talk about every damn thing, nutrition, everything. So is there a way holistic healing approach can help in healing of substance-related and addictive disorders?
Uh, I think very much so because uh, the need for relaxation, the need for feeling peaceful, blissful, accepted by a social group, having close relationships to peers or support group members, all these are very salutary in healing of people with addiction difficulties. And all of these are addressed in some way or the other by uh, Reiki, pranic healing, homeopathy, uh, social support groups, yoga, meditation groups, pranayam groups, and so on. So I forgot to mention relaxation music.
Yes.
That also is very, very important. So all these elements not only provide relaxation, freshness, and a feel good factor, they also provide confidence and they also provide peer support and group because most of these activities happen in groups. I'm not talking about homeopathy, but
Mhm.
otherwise most of these activities they happen in groups. So that creates also a very good social support system for those people. For many, uh, being a part of a socially accepting spiritual group also has proved to be very, very healthy and has accelerated the de-addiction process. Uh, and therefore, if you put all of this together, if done the right way, holistic healing can accelerate and complement the central healing processes that we do using psychiatry and psychotherapy.
Mhm. We have seen that many a times, there is a total denial of addiction from the patients. So that brings up to the question, like when there is compliance or non-compliance, how is patient education important in the context of this disorder, and how well we can give consideration that whether the patient should come for the therapy or not?
Patient education always is important, and here it's very important because primarily we first have to make it ego dystonic, the addiction. So the patient has to stand against addiction, not defend addiction
Mm-hmm.
or not deny addiction.
Mm.
One. Two, the patient has to be made to appreciate the cost benefit analysis of addiction. And once he realizes the cost benefit analysis and the price he pays, the ego determination and the ego dystonicity becomes high.
Mm.
Cognitively, the patient is ready to give it up. Third, we should make it very clear to the patient in terms of whatever causality we have found, so that the patient is clear about what aggravates, what precipitates, and what heals. From this, the do's and don'ts follow. And these do's and don'ts are very important so that the patient does not do anything that aggravates or precipitates and creates a sudden rise or a pulse
Mm.
of addiction.
Right.
The patient should also practice relaxation, meditation, therapy, because, and what we said about holistic healing, because all of those are very essential for holistic inner health,
Mm.
right, which undoubtedly will have a bearing on its healing process.
Right.
Lastly, he will be able to manage better what others say, especially parents and people at work,
Mm.
and find right holistic resources and social support systems. Also, to report well to the healer, whether it's the psychiatrist or therapist or both,
Mhm.
of what is working, what is not working. More systematically record what is symptoms he is facing, what distress he is facing. And all this put together accelerates his healing process, makes it easier for the healers also. And all of this is possible if we do the right and adequate amount of psychoeducation of the patient.
Very well explained. And when we talk about the patient education, we understand the caregivers and family members are so much essential part, even the society and the community. What should the family members of caregivers do if they are helping someone dealing with this specific disorder of substance addiction or activity related to substance abuse?
Uh, first is the first I would say that it's very important to educate the caregivers, because moral condemnation, preaching, and asking the person to exercise willpower is not enough to heal the person. Often it only aggravates it by making the person more angry and more self-destructive.
Mm.
And then addiction becomes one more element of self-destruction to take revenge from the parents. And this is also one of the causes of addiction, the anger towards the parents. And the anger is not expressed, so it turns inwards. So you destroy yourself to hurt the parent and take revenge. So this is also a cause of addiction.
That's
The
quite
self,
an important psychoanalytic fact out there.
yeah, the motivation of self-destruction. And uh, therefore, it's very important that parents don't indulge in this uh, preachy condemnation behavior. They should also recognize that this has deep roots. It cannot be just altered or given away by willpower. So when the patient says he cannot do it by willpower alone, he is not lying or just throwing a tantrum. There is a real situation where it is beyond his willpower to do anything. So the first is this understanding that what kind of situation the patient is in, and therefore what should be expected and not expected out of him, and not to create those expectations and force them punitively over the person, which aggravate the situation further. Second, they should know the do's and don'ts on their behalf so that they unknowingly don't aggravate the situation. Third, they are able to see what is working and not working in terms of therapy or medication or social support group or holistic healing, and thereby remove the non-working element, increase the working element, and accelerate healing. Fourth, they know what to report or not to report to the healing person. Fifth, uh, they don't develop secondary problems of secondary anger, secondary depression, secondary anxiety, or panic when the person has a sudden spurt of addiction, so that they don't trouble themselves and they don't trouble the patient. Uh, and lastly, they are able to collect social support groups, holistic healing tools, and help the patient manage his lifestyle so that it all adds up to his healing process.
So the addiction culture needs a lot of de-addiction support from the therapist, psychiatrist, society, family, caregiver. Thank you so much, Mr. Himanshu
Yes.
Vaidya, for sharing your knowledge with us. Namaste. We have covered today the chapter on substance-related and addictive disorders from DSM-5. In the subsequent videos, we will be covering other chapters in the same way. Do watch our coming videos and write to us. Namaste.